New Perspectives back on the air. I'm Harvey Elwood, your host. For the last several weeks, we've talked with leading members in our community and some national folk who've been calling in, and we've been talking about voter registration, voter ID bill, the election process. As you know, we'll be in an election a year for the national elections. The presidential elections is right around the corner. The Republican and the Democratic parties are shuffling, and people on all levels are engaged in getting involved. Of course, we're here in the southern area, the part of the country which has a very important role in the elections nationally. And tonight I was very pleased, and I've been trying to get on the show probably for about a month, but he has a very busy schedule, Mr. Howard Jackson. He is the director of the Orangeburg County Voter Registration and Election Commission, I would imagine.
That is correct.
And I want to welcome you to New Perspectives.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
And just want to tell you, this brother is a good brother, works really hard, has brought himself, matter of fact, I'll let him, I mean, he's involved in the military. That we do know. He's a family man, and he's really engaged in a great many things. Give us a little bit about your background before we go into the...
Thank you, and it's a pleasure being here as well. Again, my name's Howard Jackson. I'm from Orangeburg, graduated from South Carolina State University. I also graduated from the University of South Carolina. In the military, the U.S. Air Force Reserves. November will be 22 years that I've been serving. Did a tour 2.5 years mobilization for the Iraqi war.
Okay.
Mostly down in Charleston.
Okay.
Did some time over in Europe as well.
Okay.
Support of that.
Okay.
And I've been with Orangeburg County now for about 3 years in this position.
Well, as you know, we talked briefly. The most pressing issue on the minds of voters is the voter ID situation. But before we get into that, tell us something about the function of your role in the election process and your office, and how it ties into the state.
Okay. Yeah, South Carolina is unique. We have 46 counties, and each county is its own commission. We are decentralized, unlike a lot of other state agencies. Each county commission is responsible for its own county. We get direction from the state, but we're independent of the state, if that makes sense. Well,
I guess it does. In a sense, if you know anything about the South and the formation of the South in itself. Ladies and gentlemen, well, for those of people who don't know the social dynamic of the Southern process, for example, Georgia has 163 counties.
That is correct.
Okay. South Carolina has 46. It's much smaller than in population to the state of New York, and New York only has 52 counties. And one would ask, well, how can you have so many counties? Well, perhaps during its formation, little communities were formed, and there was a level of control that those communities wanted to maintain some autonomy away from the state. So I would imagine that has passed on over the years, and people want to maintain some level of control in their particular areas. What about Orangeburg County? Are there any particular dynamics that make your job difficult in any way?
Not really. Orangeburg County, we're appointed by the legislative delegation, which Senator Hutto, Senator Matthews, of course, Representatives Gilda Cobb Hunter, Representative Govan, even Baraki Sellers.
So there's some diversity there.
There is diversity,
right,
exactly.
Right.
And they are responsible for our office, along with Veterans Affairs and some other commissions as well. So our office reports to them instead of the county council or to the state. Yes.
I got you.
Yes.
Okay, because you're in other words, you're responsible to those that have appointed you to these.
That is correct.
Particular positions.
Yes. They appoint the commission, and the commission in turn appoint the director.
Okay. Now, in terms of the state director, Marcy Andino, what's her role in the county organization? 'Cause I know
Well,
she's a
Marcy
state.
is the state director. That is correct. And again, they provide direction to the counties, but there's no, if to use a military, she's not in our chain of command. We're independent. Again, we work closely together, have a great relationship. If there are any issues that are unique to Orangeburg County, we like to run those by the state. And again, if the state has some issues that are going to be unique to the county or to the counties, we like to get together on those issues as well.
Now, in terms of like the days of election, the actual days of election process, how many voting stations do we have? Do you all have to monitor?
We have 53 precincts.
53 precincts.
Including our office.
That's a lot.
On election day, our office becomes what we call fail-safe precinct. If anyone is having any issues at a precinct where they're moved or there are some issues, then they come to our office.
Now, I know having 53 locations also requires that you all don't have full-time staff all year round. You have them for the election time specifically. How are those people elected or selected, or how are they hired to do their jobs?
Yes, we have 7 commissioners, and they represent different regions of the county. And each commissioner is responsible for selecting the poll managers in that region.
Now, in terms of autonomy or electoral fairness, is there a requirement that half are Democrat or half are Republican? Is there any rule to that effect?
No, actually, we tell them to check their politics at the door.
I see. Because now here, the difference I'm going to use some states that I'm familiar with. In South Carolina, people are not required to register by party.
That is correct.
So that means that if somebody if somebody goes to vote during a primary election, let's say it's a Republican primary, a person can technically or non-technically be a Democrat and vote in that party's.
And you're absolutely correct. We had that problem during last year's race, the county races, especially when we had the special election for sheriff, which we had the primary, and some folks who voted in the Democratic primary thought that they could not vote in the general election. So we had some of those issues, and we normally have some of those issues because, like you mentioned, we don't register by party in South Carolina. So you could vote in the Republican primary, and then for the general election, vote for a Democratic candidate.
Mm-hmm. And that's why oftentimes you don't, there's really technically in that sense, you can't really determine the number of how many Republicans or how many Democrats. Technically, you can poll, you can do some polling, but you can't necessarily always get an accurate count. One other thing that, I've gotten some questions that prior to this discussion that came up regards when elections come up. In other words, just recently we've got the city council members, or the county council, and city council members, who come up for election time. The people have complained that no one knows when it's time. In other words, most of all the city council representatives have all gone back or will be going back unchallenged.
They did go back unopposed. All 3 of them did. Yes.
All 3 went back unopposed. And in a democracy, a lot of times the information is just not available. In other words, people have complained or suggested to me that it's not something that the newspaper wants to publicize.
No, we actually pay the newspaper to print those ads.
They print ads.
Yes, and the ads are run twice.
But there's no story around it, is what I'm suggesting. In other words, it's not front page news. It's like a legal notice.
Exactly, it is a legal notice.
And who really reads legal notices?
Exactly.
You see what I'm saying? So it's a way technically to keep people out of the process, because I'm quite sure I believe that anyone who, I don't think that there's total apathy in Orangeburg. I think that there are a lot of issues and there are a lot of things. And you, as a graduate of South Carolina State University, and Clarence Jones, who's the engineer and producer for this show, you all are young people. Now, I'm not saying anything against age, because age is wisdom, but I am quite sure that Orangeburg could use some fresh blood, some young-minded person, because I can tell you, I first ran for public office or was involved in public life. I was in my 20s, and Dr. King, for example, was a 27 or 28-year-old college student when he led the Montgomery bus boycott. Actually, he was 26 when he led the Montgomery bus boycott. So we've got a lot of young blood that potentially can fill the void. Young ideas. Hannibal, young man. Alexander the Great, 17 years old, conquered Europe. Young people have a role and can lead other young people. You know, I had a conversation just recently with a young lady. I was out of state, and I asked her, and I think Clarence and I had this discussion, do you know anybody in your age group that you can call as a leader, as a national leader, or just somebody from your community? You see, now public life or taking a seat as a city council person or a county council person gives them now some person that they can look to and perhaps emulate. But when everybody's 60 plus, younger people don't think that there's a place for them, both in the electoral process as well as serving in public office.
Yes, but I think if we look at Baraki Sellers, I mean, he does have a portion of Orangeburg County, and he's a part of the delegation here, and I think he's still in his 20s, if I'm not mistaken.
But you see, Bakari is unique. He comes from a family of activism and involvement. His father was shot during the Orangeburg massacre. And so and that's another thing. One of the reasons that I got involved in voting was because my mother was engaged. You know, Shirley Chisholm was someone that I saw as a public figure, friend of my mother, someone in the community, and it was inspiring to me. So if you have young people, Bakari does set a good example for many young people. He's not only a great legislative person and representative, but again, his situation is somewhat unique. And I'd like to see more civics, or some people have suggested more civics in the classroom. And I think, Brother Howard, that's why we asked you to come on the show, to, perhaps to inspire other young people, because you're a young man, I mean, you hold a big position here.
Well, I'll give an example. Every year we send a letter to all the universities in the county as well as the high schools in the counties to come out and do a voter registration drive. We did a drive, I think 2 years ago on this campus. We send a letter every year, but we don't get responses.
Yeah, there's a lot of apathy out
there. And the high schools, we go to all the high schools, and probably the most applications that we get from a high school is probably 20. Okay. Some of the schools, I'm a graduate of Orangeburg Wilkinson High School. That's where I registered to vote back in high school. So, that's always going to have a special place in my heart. So we go out there, and as large as that school is, to only get maybe 20 or 30 applications is really sad. Now, we do have some social studies or civics teachers there. As a matter of fact, one gentleman came in the office today and yesterday with folders of registration applications, and most of them were not they'll turn 18 by election day, so we'll hold their applications until their birthday to mail their cards to them. But if you don't have teachers who are involved, or from an administration standpoint, when we come to really encourage students to register to vote, then it does, because we sit for hours at some of these schools and only get one school we went to, I won't call the name, we got one application.
Well, perhaps there's a suggestion, and ladies and gentlemen, whether you know it or not, I've been an organizer all my life, and I love that. And I have a lot of time on my hand, even though I do an awful lot. Please engage me as a civilian citizen to help you all organize some of those days. I'd work as a liaison. No pay, looking for nothing at all, other than because I taught social studies and I taught political science and government, both on a college level, lectured on a college level, as well as a middle school. So we could organize it and prepare the students a week or two ahead of time, letting them know we're coming, talking about the important process of voting, particularly as we get closer to the election time. I know you guys are busy during that time.
Yes.
But perhaps they'll see the sense of it, And let's be realistic. You have a very young president seated now. He's just turning 50 years old or 51 years old. And that may also be some level of encouragement for young people to be involved in the process.
I'll give you an example. You talk about apathy. Ward 4, which encompasses this university and Claflin University, and some segments of right outside the gate, is the largest precinct in Orangeburg County.
Quick question.
Yes.
Now, these young people are considered eligible to vote in an election here in Orangeburg if they live on campus?
If they live on campus, that is correct. They can register as a student on campus, and they'll be registered in Ward 4.
Okay. And technically, let's take USC, for example. USC has the power to influence all of the buildings, all of the government that surrounds it.
That is correct.
And all those big edifices and all those big dormitories and all that money that's flowing there is a direct result of the voting power of both the students and the faculty and people who are concerned from that community.
That is correct.
So what you're suggesting, perhaps South Carolina State University needs to have a more aggressive way about going. And once again, you know, I want to just be honest. I know politics quite well. Power concedes nothing. And if someone has it, they're not technically, or they're not readily available or readily willing to just hand it over to somebody else. So by not providing that information, it continues to allow them to be empowered. You know, I mean, the best way for an elected official to stay in office is not to do their job, but to keep their job a secret. You know?
You're absolutely right. And, you know, I go to talk to classes and different organizations, and especially when I go talk to students, we talk about the historic election back in 2008. Orangeburg County, we had a 68% voter turnout. Okay. And, you know, in the big scheme of things, that seems like a lot of people. But, you know, I break it down to the students, and I say, would you be satisfied if you got a 68 on the exam? Exactly. And then they go, wow, you know, I never thought of it that way.
What are our numbers in Orangeburg County? What do we
have, with the latest census data, we're right around 90,000 people.
90,000.
And we have about 57,000 registered voters.
Okay, so you got 90,000 residents.
Yes.
Or eligible.
Eligible residents, that's correct.
Eligible voters, and we have 50,000.
57,000 registered voters.
So we're lacking some 30,000 or 33,000
easily
people who, ladies and gentlemen, that is appalling. It is appalling. Now, I've heard arguments where people don't want to register to vote because they want to avoid jury duty.
That's not true. I think the city of Orangeburg pulls from the registered voters in the city, but the county does not.
Right. Well,
that comes from your driver's license. When you get a driver's license, that's how they pull you for jury duty.
Well, you know, I'm gonna be honest with you. People who are citizens should be glad to serve on juries. I'm gonna tell you why. As small as this community is, 90,000 electorate or people who are eligible to vote, only 57,000 are registered. And I'm not suggesting to be unfair as a juror. I'm not suggesting that at all. But if you serve on a jury in a community which is this size, it is almost assured that if you don't know the individual who is involved in that particular incident or situation, you'll know some relative or some neighbor. You yourself have some level of moral conscience because you will understand the dynamics of not only the case, but the individual involved in the case. So shunning your civic responsibility or duty as a juror perhaps it's hard to complain about a system when you're not participating in it, is what I'm saying.
It's just like voting. Yeah, you can't complain about the elected officials if you do nothing about it.
I hear people complain about the governor every day. And these are the people, many of them, who didn't vote or didn't have any role in the process, did not get involved. You know, people complain about the voter ID bill. Some people complain about the unions and what the governor is doing, and $144 million that the governor decided she did not want to accept from the federal government, okay, to go to education. Now, who can complain about that? The ones legitimately who can complain are those who were actively involved and engaged in the electoral process. Those who were not what really can they say? Clarence wanted to say something. This is Clarence Jones, everybody.
Yeah, I wanted to go back to the census part where we have 90,000 people. I think there's much more than 90,000. I think
That's
there's
reported.
It's reported, but I think there's over 100,000. But one of the excuses that I've heard personally, because they say, well, I don't want the government to know where I live. I said, they already know, so why are you not registered?
Yeah.
And then you go off. Now, this is a certain lady now. She goes off, and she has a couple of kids. She is poor. She's one of the people that, if you report in and say that part of the census count, then maybe we get more money into the county.
Exactly.
But because of I'm not going to really degrade her like that, but because of your skewed ideas, that is why we're not getting the money. That is why we're not getting the power, as Harvey alluded to. That's why we're not getting it, because not just her, but we probably have thousands of other people within this county who think in the same way. What are your comments about that?
Well, that is correct. The county and the state will not receive certain level of funding because of that. We actually population decreased countywide. We're several counties, and we're in that what's called the I-95 corridor of shame. Those counties, and
you said corridor of shame?
Corridor of shame, yes.
Wow.
Yes, because of the economic situation.
I see.
Education,
Sure.
some of those things.
Sure.
That's not a Howard Jackson phrase.
No, that's
exactly.
Reported.
And what happens is those counties, the people are leaving those counties because there aren't any jobs there in these counties.
Yes.
So they're going to, like Rock Hill, for an example. That's one of the areas that has a population increase. Lexington population increase. So those counties, not only is there economic development there, but now there's going to be more money there because of the population increase. So the rich get richer and the poor get poorer.
Yeah. And, and here's what happens. Voting strength, ladies and gentlemen, in this county, and I'm not saying anything. I got people in Aiken who are listening to me, people who are in Augusta that are listening to me, and people all over the state that are listening to me. And we understand the importance of voting. And a good person just walked in just now, a Reverend Caesar Richburg, who I had talked about a little earlier, a fantastic event that they've got coming up. And we're talking about elections and voting and the strength and the importance of people getting out and getting involved in the electoral process. And thank you for stopping by, Reverend Richburg. We appreciate you coming in to the studio. If you have any comments, we'll throw you a mic and you can just get engaged. Well, we've been talking about that. But once again, let's go on to one thing about this situation where we're dealing with the voter ID bill.
Okay.
That's a really important topic. I've had a series of guests that have come on. We've had shows where we start talking about one thing and it runs into the voter ID bill. So what are your thoughts? I mean, I know.
Well, one thing to consider with the voter ID bill is the fact that the U.S. Justice Department has not pre-cleared that bill. So we're still under the current system. Okay. And the Attorney General released an opinion. I think that was published in the TND last week. All of the elections for September and October are going to be operated under the current rules.
Right.
Now, our elections, unfortunately, are going to be in November. So we're still kind of in the air on which rules. If the issue is, if the Justice Department comes back and say that bill
is unconstitutional.
Let's say they say if it's constitutional, then we have to educate the public as to what type of IDs they're going to have. We're going to have an aggressive education program to get the word out. And the folks in the election world, we're putting on elections, so we're going to really have our backs against the wall to educate the public and also prepare elections for November.
Well, it's been suggested that the equipment that requires to do the IDs and that kind of thing won't be available. The funding may be available, but the equipment very well may not be. And
I think the last thing that we got with that was the department, DMV, was going to supply the funding for those equipment, and we were supposed to get one of those machines in each office. We're going to have one of those machines.
Well, I can tell you, ladies and gentlemen,
if the funding is
I
available.
can tell you it's going to be a nightmare. Historically, the historical view is this. African American people, poor people, have been disenfranchised from the day of the arrival on this continent. The voting process, which is the access to upward mobility for many groups and individuals, is a right guaranteed by the Constitution of the United States. And it is ironic, and it's not just ironic, it's clear to most of those people who recognize there's been no level of voter fraud here in this county, in this state, or in this country, which would require additional funds to be used to attempt to, and believe it or not, I believe it's to weed out legitimate voters or to discourage legitimate voters. And I know you can't go on the record as an official, but that's just what people have been saying, and it's very clear as far as I'm concerned. Really quickly, wanted to ask you about employment opportunities for the poll watchers and stuff like that. How much do they get paid, and how do you become one of those? Because I know some young people interested in that.
Yeah, poll managers, they get paid $60 a day. Okay. So they get paid $60 for training, day of training. Working election day, they get $60 as well. And then the county throws in $10.
Okay, so that's $130.
$130,
that's pretty good.
Exactly.
That's pretty good.
And since I've been here, we've had an aggressive campaign to get college and high school students working in there. The problem is dependability.
Okay.
We've had some issues with a lot of younger poll managers not showing up on election day, and that causes a logistical nightmare. When we're staffing, you're thinking you're going to have 3 or 4 people, and then I think about 2 years ago we had one precinct where only 2 people showed up. And legally you have to have 3 people to run a precinct.
And now I noticed in the paper, I believe it was yesterday, Orangeburg County and many of the counties have elections coming up very closely, or the filing deadlines are right around the corner.
For the municipalities.
Correct. And you guys govern that as well?
We assist them.
You assist in them, but the municipalities like the town of North and Bowman and Nices, they control their own.
Yes, what happens is we have what's called a transfer of authority.
Okay.
I think all of the municipalities except the town of Branchville have transferred the authority to the county. So we do all the logistical issues with the elections, and they still certify the elections. And if there's a protest, their commission, the Municipal Election Commission, will hear the protest. But everything logistically involved with elections, the county takes care of that.
I've had the pleasure of being in on some of those protest hearings, and I'm thankful to the training that I had over the course of my life to rectify what the citizens of some of the towns have felt were unfair. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Howard Jackson. He is the director of the Orangeburg County Voter Registration and Election Commission. I like to consider him to be a yeoman, community-involved man of God, someone who's been serving this community for quite some time, a graduate of South Carolina State University, and the outstanding job that you've done. I want to thank you for coming on New Perspectives, sharing your opinions and views, and sharing your knowledge, man, is your depth of knowledge. And please, I need you to come back.
Thank you. I will. It's been a pleasure.
I want you to come back because there's a host of other topics that we haven't, touched on. I'm sure there's a lot of questions that are out there. Ladies and gentlemen, as always, hit us up on Facebook. Get to us, WSSB website. Send us a message or give us a phone call at WSSB 90.3 FM. And I want to thank Clarence Jones, the engineer and producer of New Perspectives. Howard, any last
Yes,
words?
I'll be remiss. November 8th, Election Day, 14 municipalities and all 3 school boards.
Okay, say it again.
November 8th, Tuesday, November 8th, 7 to 7. All 3 school districts, District 3, 4, and 5, and 14 municipalities are scheduled to have their elections on that day.
Give us your phone number for any information.
533-6210.
That's 803.
803-533-6210.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is New Perspective. Signing off. Thank you for listening, and I hope you'll tune in to us next week.